Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the Louis Theroux DVD, The Good, the Bad and the Godly. Now, I'm a big fan of Louis Theroux. Anybody in the UK will instantly know his name. He's a premium documentary maker. He has made a name for himself all over the world and he's very well respected. Now, I recently reviewed his Scientology movie on the channel, and I've made it a mission to try and collect as many of his DVDs over the last few weeks as I could, just so that I could catch up. Both me and my wife enjoy his documentaries. And while I have a few which I will be showcasing in this month's update video, this is the first one that I've completed. Now this one has 5 documentaries, 6 if you consider that one of them is a parts 1 and 2. And I'm going to give you a brief review of each of these documentaries, so I do hope you enjoy it. And we shall start with the very first documentary, which is called Law and Order in Lagos. Now this is one that sees Louis going to Nigeria, and what's interesting and fascinating about this documentary is that he spends an awful lot of his time in Nigeria with the criminal gangs. Basically, they don't see themselves as criminal gangs, they see themselves as part of a union. But essentially the whole place is like split up into districts. There's different gangs for each district, and there's like one that kind of oversees it all. And he spends time with some of the smaller gang members, but also he spends time with like the top guy, even though he doesn't spend a lot of time talking to the top guy. He talks an awful lot to the top guy's number 2, if you like, his voice, his spokesperson, and he tries to get a handle and a perspective on everything from their point of view. And he does the usual Louis things. He does ask challenging questions. He doesn't always get answers. There's an awful lot of avoidance, certainly from the criminal base, but he also does spend quite a lot of time with like the law in Nigeria, and there's this task force that has been set up to try and control the streets and control the gangs, and also to take down illegal structures that have been put up, and they will literally just take them down if people put them up where they shouldn't. So you get this documentary from quite a few different perspectives. I think I'm going to give this documentary a 7 out of 10. Not that it's bad, I just don't think he gets deep enough in and gets the answers that he wants. Quite a lot of the answers they evade answering, they'll give vague answers, all that kind of stuff. So you don't necessarily leave with much knowledge than when you went in. But saying that, it is still an interesting watch, that is for sure. Now the second documentary is called Louis Theroux's America's Medicated Kids, and this is one of his most renowned documentaries, and essentially spends time in America with some families who, due to diagnosed medical conditions for their children, have chosen to have their children medicated to cope with these diagnoses. Now the diagnoses range from ADHD to bipolar to Asperger's, all these different things. Now obviously you can't medicate Asperger's, but the others you can. And you see he goes through the whole process. He speaks to the doctors that do the medicating. He spends a lot of time with a number of families who have got their children on medication. He gets to know these families and these children. Some of them, it's quite a frustrating one to watch this, especially if you're a parent, because you start judging parents who are medicating their kids, and as the documentary goes on, it's a really fascinating one, because you start to see it from the parents' perspective eventually, certainly some of them, and by the end of the documentary you're not just as judgmental as when you started, which I think is exactly how a documentary should be presented. They give you the facts, you get both sides of the story, and then you're allowed at the end to make your own judgment. So that's what I really like about this documentary. It's really good. It's really in depth. He gets right into these families. He asks all these difficult questions, and right at the end, it's fascinating because you just don't feel as judgmental as when you started. So I think personally this is one of his best documentaries. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10, and if you haven't seen it, certainly this is one worth searching out and checking out, because I personally think it is a really, really interesting one. Now the next one is the Ultra Zionists. Wow, what to say about this one? Louis basically goes to Israel, and he spends time mainly with a load of Jews. Now Jews obviously see this as their holy land, but they lost this land an awful lot of time ago. But they've started going back, and I think it's about 300. When this documentary was made, it was about 300,000, maybe a bit more, that had moved back into the Holy Land. However, it's not their land anymore legally, and the Arabs that are living there hate them, and the Jews hate the Arabs. So you could imagine it's not a pleasant environment, and there's an awful lot of conflict on both sides. And again, Louis, I think, does a really, really good job of telling it from both sides. He gets in a few tight situations. There's a few riots kick off. He has to wear one of the vests now and again. Gets stones thrown at him. And again, he asks some interesting questions here. And it's fascinating to see these Jews that see this as their home, and I can understand it. The only way I could really get my head around this one would be, what if someone, you know, took over my country, and I was booted out, and then, you know, a couple of centuries later, we the English decided to come back home, but it wasn't our home anymore. That's the best way I could kind of get in there, get my head around this one. So a really fascinating one. Again, I'm not just so sure that you were any clearer by the end, but it was certainly an interesting watch. Maybe it's because I'm not particularly religious. I found it a bit baffling now and again. So again, I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. Not just maybe the strongest, but certainly an interesting watch, that's for sure. Now the next one is Louis Theroux's Miami Mega Jail, parts 1 and 2. Now this is a two-parter basically, and he's done jails before, and this one he goes to this massive jail in Miami. It's kind of like a holding jail for people who are going to be sentenced. So some people have been in there years, they haven't even been to court yet and sentenced, and he spends time with the guards and with an awful lot of those behind bars, and he meets people who are potentially facing the death penalty. He meets other people that have been transferred there that shouldn't maybe have been transferred there, and it's really a brutal. I mean, people get put in these cells where there's about 12 people, and you've got to fight for your bunk and fight to get your stuff. You've got to prove yourself through violence and things like that, and it doesn't seem like there's an awful lot done about it by the guards. And then part 2 of the documentary follows on certainly from part 1, and you still see some of the people that he met in part 1, but part 2 focuses on those, especially the younger ones, who are given a second chance, and they are kind of sent to like the military part of the jail, where they have to go through this, I think it's something like a 6-month military course, and if they pass this course, they'll kind of pretty much be released back into society. And it shows some of them going through this process, and some of them succeeding and some of them failing, and it's really quite fascinating. So I personally think, again, this is a really, really strong documentary, both parts 1 and 2. Very entertaining. A very strong 9 out of 10 again from me for these 2 documentaries. Really, really interesting to watch. And that leads us on to the last documentary, and it was Louis Theroux's America's Most Hated Family in Crisis. Now, 4 years previous to this documentary, he went and did a documentary on America's Most Hated Family. Now, if you don't know, this is apparently the family who've got their own church, and most of the members of their own family, and they're so intringent in their own beliefs in God and the Bible that they actually picket soldiers' funerals, and shout vile things at people at the soldiers' funerals. The reasons which, after watching 2 documentaries, I've seen this and I've seen the other one, when he meets them for the first time. And this is probably the most shocking documentary, or certainly one of the most shocking I've seen of him, where they literally hold signs up denouncing gays. I'm not going to say the words they use, gays and Jews and you name it. I mean, the religious fanatics basically, and Louis really does try to get under their skin and get the right questions answered. And essentially this documentary, when he goes back, it says they're in crisis because quite a few of the members, when he met them previously, have left the church. Some of the family members who we met the first time round, who were very, very devout and really into the church, have seen it for what it was and have actually left. So he goes back, and the numbers have certainly dwindled from the first time round, but their beliefs are still as strong from the older members. So again, quite a shocking documentary. You can't believe it really, what you hear in this documentary. So I'm going to give this one a very, very strong 9 out of 10 as well. A fascinating documentary to watch, that is for certain. Right, so overall then, for this DVD, The Good, the Bad, the Godly, there's some really fantastic documentaries on here, and depending on your interests, you will like some more than others. I think they're all interesting, they're all fascinating, but some for me are more interesting than others. But for the DVD itself, I'm going to give it an overall rating of 9 out of 10. These are dead easy and cheap to pick up now on eBay, so if you like Louis Theroux documentaries, I think it's certainly worth checking out and getting them bought and getting them watched, because they're really, really great watches. So I have picked up a few more of his DVDs. When I've watched all the content in them, I will hopefully be reviewing them as well. So I hope you enjoyed this review, a little bit different. I do like a good documentary, and I think Louis Theroux is one of the best out there making them currently. So thanks for watching everybody, and of course I will be back for more content on Screen Stars very, very soon.